All right. So this presentation is going to be essentially a going through a release pipeline for something that isn't Flex. We're all familiar with using Smash and using Deployer and how that process generally works, but obviously we're not the only company that deploys software. So this is going to be kind of going through development and pushing it out there for other consumers to use, actually using something through GitHub. So the first one is going to be system.io.abstractions, which is a project that I work on in the open source community. It's essentially a in-memory file system, if you will, because with unit tests, you don't want to ever touch the file system. So it allows us to make sure we can add files, we can remove files, and make sure that everything is kosher without actually having to touch the file system. So for this, I'm going to implement this issue here that I just happened to add, which is essentially stating that when we try to actually do something, it's not behaving as it should according to the actual implementation, because for what it's worth, the library is just a wrapper around system.io. So we can see here that when you pass in a file name, the file name can't be null. There is a null argument exception, or a argument null exception, and this issue is stating that that it's currently not behaving that way. So wow, that is really small. So the first thing that I actually want to do is to actually kind of prove that out. So the first thing that we are going to do, we're not going to look at the actual code itself. We're going to prove that out and just say, hey, we have a test. This keyboard is way different. We're going to say that this is really different. The mock file info, it's just a constructor. So I'm just going to say mock file info is fine. The input is going to be a null path, and that should throw a argument null exception. We're going to need a file system in order to actually get this up and running. We actually call it a mock file system, which is a little unfortunate because it's not really what it is. Before my time. The actual action that we're going to be doing here is we are going to be saying, when we new up a mock file info, that the passing in a file system, passing in a null for the path, that the second parameter is just null, that this should assert.throws a argument null exception for that action. So at this point, we haven't looked at the production code at all. All we're doing is I am not. I was going to fix that later because that was one thing that actually really bugged me. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to actually put it in the class. We have the using statements below the namespaces, which is just really confusing. So this is going to create a new test for us. We can go ahead and we can run that test, and it should fail because that's what the issue says, that it's not actually behaving as it should. And it does. It's expected to be a argument null exception, but at this point in time, it's just allowing you. It's just but was null. So if we actually go to the implementation, we can see that is actually true, that we have this mock file system, which is actually checking for a argument null exception, but it's actually not doing it. And you can also see on the left here, there is some green bars, which is the code coverage. And right now, that line is actually currently, it's actually covered, but it's not actually doing anything. So just because something is actually covered doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually working as you expect it to. It's just grayer now because the test is failing. Uncovered are these gray lines here. So we already know it's covered, but it's not doing as we expect it to. So the fix for this is simply just do throw new argument null exception for name of for path. Make that change, we can do a build and then rerun the test, and that should allow it to pass. There we go. So once that passes, I'm not gonna like create like a local NuGet feed and like make a new project and try to import this library or do anything special. We started with the failing test. We made it pass. Like I'm good to go for this. So we just need to actually push that change up. So for system.io extractions, I need to go ahead and probably should have done this first. File path null info. Just saying add null check for path. Can't. Let me push this up. So this is just pushing up a branch to my fork of this project. I am a maintainer, so I could push right to master, but generally you want to just push to a fork first. So if we go up to GitHub, we should actually see this. If I could see past the blue bar. I don't know where that went. So I can create a pull request. I can say add check for null, and actually what was that? That was issue number 345. So this is going to be fixes issue 345. We can see that we added a test for it. We can see the actual change. We can go ahead and we can create that pull request. This is going to fire off very similar to VSTS. This will actually just check to make sure that the build will actually complete before we actually merge it in. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. I actually never tested this in its entirety because it's actually changing production. So I'm hoping it doesn't take too long. But I mean, so at this point, are there any questions on what I've done so far? Awesome. Oh, cool.
I'm curious, is there some special tool you're using to show the code coverage in Visual Studio, or is that like built in?
It's with this one is .cover for JetBrains. I don't think we have our own licenses for it, but it's another JetBrains product very similar to ReSharper, and they have code coverage, and they can show you each project, in their code coverage metrics. This one's obviously super low because it's just a wrapper around it. There really are no tests for it. Everything else should have a test for it. I am probably more in favor of NCrunch if you're also looking for a different version of that. I think that's like 150 for a personal license. That one will actually, as you make changes and as you save, it'll keep running your tests. So that way we can see that, for example, this line here is uncovered. There are no tests for this. So if we were to go ahead and we were to write new code, these lines should technically be considered uncovered because we don't have tests for them. But I think it's a really handy tool to actually see what's covered and what's not. So those are the two that I'm aware of. Huh? Yeah, I could have swore, since like I'm an admin of this, that I could just say that I could just force it, but I'm actually not seeing that option. I've done that in the past. Maybe it actually has to. I think it's if it fails, I can do it. I don't know if I can do it if it's just purely pending.
I mean,
Oh no, it should. Because I know the Travis one did, and to talk more on that, I guess. So this is actually doing two environments right now. There's two checks going on. There is Travis, which is our Linux environment, and there's AppVeyor, which is our Windows environment. We do this just to make sure that our system is going to work on both Linux and Windows, because it's a file system or a fake file system. So there's obviously Windows and Linux are different in their behaviors. So we have some tests that we don't even run on Linux, having to do with like drives or ACLs or anything that are specific to Windows, because otherwise they would just fail on the Linux environment. And there's just some like gotchas of like special characters. Linux only allows or only disallows, I think, like the null character for file paths, whereas on Windows, if you try and do something with like a / or a period, it'll tell you that that's not allowed. But on Linux, it's completely fine. So we can't just write a method for creating a file or creating a folder that restricts those characters, because it would actually work on a Windows environment, or a Linux environment rather. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and merge this into master. And so how our system works, essentially what's going to happen is I'm going to merge this in, and this is going to fire off a webhook to AppVeyor. Pretty much at this point, it's deployed. It's going into production right now. We have a webhook that calls into AppVeyor, and AppVeyor will pick that up and say, okay, you've merged into master. Let me go ahead and cut a new NuGet package for you, a new release for you. So we can say here on Windows, this should be our current build. So over here, it's already bumped up our version automatically. Right now it's queued. We were on 2.1.0, 2.1.6 that would have been. So my commit would have pushed it to 2.1.7. And so AppVeyor automatically looked at the previous build number, bumped that up to a new version. And once this actually goes through and completes, if the time is correct, we should actually see that in the NuGet gallery here, that again, we were on 2.1.6, 92 people downloaded it. At some point when that finishes, this should pop up and change to 2.1.7. 0 downloads unless someone's just incredibly quick. And then people can go into the NuGet library and actually download this. I mean, this is, again, it's a public-facing product library. People can use it, download it. I've used it in a couple of projects here. So once this finishes, I can go back to my desk. I can go on NuGet. I can go to Visual Studio, pull it, update it, and then deploy it to Plex. So I mean, for the most part, looks like I have a minute left. Once that finishes, that should update. If it doesn't update in the 1 minute, just have to trust me. So, so that's pretty much all I had. If anyone had any, I think we do questions at the end now, you said, or now or later. I have a minute, so I could probably take like one question if there's anything really bugging you. Otherwise, I can talk to you after. So. Okay. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Did the timer start before you logged in?
No, he just started as soon as I got up here. Huh? I know, right? Yeah, the login took longer. I have like, there we go. Now I'm done. All right, yeah. So at this point, just or we can look later after the meeting and hit refresh or whatever. It'll be there. I won't touch anything.